People often think that they are inconsistent readers, that they fall in and out of love with reading. They need more discipline, but I don't think that that is the problem. The deeper issue is that we are trying to read the same way throughout the entire year. I've always paid attention to the seasonal shift, the way the light changes, how your routines start to move. And looking back, I can actually see what else was changing, and that was my reading life was adjusting as well. Not just what I was reading, but how I was reading. The time of day I wanted to reach for a book, the kind of attention span I had within me, and the kind of stories that I could hold. And for a long time, I thought the answer was quite simple, that I just needed to choose the right book for the right season. Spring books, autumn books, winter reads. But I did notice something over time. Even though I had chosen books that felt right, they didn't always match the way that I wanted to read in the moment. And that was the shift. So seasonal reading for me now isn't just about choosing those books, it's something that starts a little bit earlier than that. And about noticing how my life and my reading life is changing and responding to that. Seasonal shifts are something I became more aware of in adulthood. After moving from a climate where the seasonal changes were very subtle and very minimal to the one that I'm in now, where they're more visible and tangible, I'm trying to pay attention to nature and how I'm responding to that change rather than seeing the date on my calendar and thinking, great, it's autumn now, it's time to read The Great Gatsby. But over time, I've realized that these changes aren't just aesthetic, they're actually signals. Signals about my energy, about my attention, and most definitely about my capacity to read. And they started to shape what I was reading without me forcing it. I can now see that my energy levels are much higher in summer, and they tend to fall a little bit when autumn rolls around. It was only in the last 6 weeks or so that I really felt like I was in a reading slump, and I was struggling to connect with the books that I had chosen for late summer reading. Most recently, I was reading The Sun Walks Down by Fiona McFarlane, which by all accounts should be a perfect fit for me. But I inadvertently started reading it as the weather began to turn. And I had finished 3 other books in the weeks prior that were very similar. I really needed a change in my reading, something that felt like a pivot from the late summer reading into that transitional period I could feel with autumn right on the cusp. So I put down The Sun Walks Down and I picked up something that I would not normally pick up, which was a young adult fantasy called The Wicked King. And this is a sequel to the book The Cruel Prince that I had read last winter. So picking it up felt like a very big pivot into something that was familiar, being a sequel, but also something that could kind of help me transition into those cooler months. It felt like a real reset, and while The Sun Walks Down was something that I would have loved to have stayed in 100% only 2 months prior, instead as I read it, I felt like I was failing as a reader. But really, I was asking myself to read with the same energy and attention that I had been giving to my summer reading over the last 4 months. So my focus wasn't the problem. It was that what I was trying to reading no longer fit the season that I was in. The first signal of seasonal change is most definitely the light. Being a photographer ruined me in the best possible way where I can't help but notice it. Parts of my home glow in the afternoon sun. My reading chair indoors, which is in a really cool and shaded corner of our home, becomes dappled with the afternoon sunlight. And after months of reading outside, I feel my home is inviting me back in. I do resist it at first. I stubbornly take a blanket with me outside, telling myself that it's not too cold to read outside just yet. Dinner starts to get earlier, reading moves to lamplight, and honestly, when the colder months come, I am just one pioneering historical fiction novel away from wrapping myself up in a scratchy wool shawl and reading by candlelight. But emotionally, something shifts as well. When the colder and darker months come, I feel more introspective and I really want to learn, to sit with ideas rather than chase plot. In Katherine May's book, Wintering, she talks about this, about how summer reading for her is about books that are entertaining, sweeping historical fiction, romances, adventures. And winter is for reflection and non-fiction. And I find that to be completely true for me as well. Winter is the time when I want to read that very long, very dense Tudor biography or that classic that's been on my shelf for months. And I do feel that this winter, Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel is calling my name again after I read maybe 1/5 of it last spring, but it didn't quite click at that point. I also do think that I read more in the colder months. I'm a natural hibernator, and after our very long and very hot Australian summers, autumn and winter feel like such a permission to rest, and all of that shapes how and what I want to read. And this is where most people go wrong, and this is what actually changed my reading. The first thing that changes is my pace. Regardless of the season, I allow myself to read at the pace that feels easiest. Sometimes that means reading less or prioritizing a different format of reading like audiobooks. In summer, I feel like I can read in much shorter bursts. The books that I'm choosing to read, that I'm drawn to, are books that allow me to jump in for 10 minutes at the doctor's surgery or for 5 minutes while I'm cooking dinner in the evening. A chapter before bed or an audiobook while I'm driving in the car or deep cleaning my home. I stop expecting myself to sit down with a dense novel for an hour if I know I don't have the attention or the time for it. And in winter, the opposite tends to happen. I can read for longer, I can hold a more complicated story, and instead of fighting that change, I really am trying to work with it. Most people try and push through this change, and I think that is where we start to feel like we are finding reading to be difficult or that we're entering into a reading slump. Often towards the end of a season and a reading season, I tend to flick through my commonplace book. I have a look at the stories, at the phrases and quotes that I've captured that are really a reflection of what interested me over the last few months. What themes kept surfacing? Books like Heidi and Bambi that I read over the spring or the summer led me to reading books like H is for Hawk over the autumn and winter. It's less about tracking what I have read, but about noticing what has really stayed with me. And that's usually the clearest signal of all, not what I have read and not how many books that I have checked off, but those books that I couldn't stop thinking about. And only then, once I've really identified this, do I then create a seasonal TBR. Not to plan everything out, but to reflect what I have been drawn to and what I want to move into in the coming months. What really feels like the right book for the way I'm feeling right now. And even then, this seasonal TBR is a list that is much smaller than what it used to be. I used to make enormous TBRs for the season, filled with books that fit the mood of the season most definitely. But now I choose just a few. Something that is a challenge, something that is edifying or immersive, and another that is comforting. And I'm actually working on a future video where I will share with you how I create my seasonal TBR. And I look forward to sharing that with you soon. But ultimately, I want my reading list to feel like something that supports the season I am in, not just another list of things that I need to get to, or something that I start to feel like I'm behind on. And when the weather cools, I feel something shift in my environment as well. My reading moves from being outdoors by the pool in the sunlight to indoors in a chair by my bookcases with a blanket. Mornings get slower, longer, often starting in bed with a coffee and a book because blankets and books go well together. But as I said, my books change as well. In the colder months, they start to get longer and denser, more demanding. And I think a book reads very differently based on the season as well. Last winter, I read The Secret History by Donna Tartt for the first time, and it became one of my favourite reading experiences for the year. Had I read that book in summer, I would have rushed through it. It is the same book, but reading it in the different seasons would be a completely different experience, because I was a different reader that season. In winter, I could match my pace to the book. I had the space for it, and that changed everything about how I felt as I read the book. It wasn't because I followed a plan, it was because I paid attention. And I think I actually shared in the video before I read The Secret History, when I was talking about maybe reading it, was because I felt like I was in a slump. In those cooler months, I don't reach for lightness, I reach for immersion. I want to disappear into that book. So I chose the right book for the right season, I matched my pace to it, and it changed everything. And I think that's why some seasons, some reading seasons, stay with us so vividly. Not because we happen to pick the perfect book, but it's a beautiful reading experience where the season and the story have arrived at the same time. But I do want to say, even though the season shifts, some things remain the same. I still return to reading every day, not out of discipline or because I have to, but because it's where I feel most like myself. The pace may shift, the books might change, but I am still showing up every day and reading becomes an anchor for me. Even when everything else about it changes, I feel that it is the ritual that changes, the intention remains the same. So as we're sitting on this edge of a seasonal change, whether you are coming into or in autumn, as I am now, or coming into spring in the Northern Hemisphere, this is a moment to really pay attention. Not to plan, but to notice. What is holding your attention? What feels different? What kind of reading feels possible now? So if your reading is feeling hard and inconsistent, it's not because you are failing at your reading. It's because you are trying to read the same way throughout the entire year. And a reading life isn't something you just change once. It's something that moves with you. And once you start noticing that, you don't need to force it. It begins to take shape on its own. The goal isn't to read more or to read perfectly, but to read in a way that actually belongs and fits in your life. And from there, choosing what to read becomes much clearer. I will share more about building those seasonal reading lists very, very soon, but I hope you enjoyed this perspective. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you have a wonderful week of reading ahead of you, and I will speak with you soon. Bye.